Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Hey, well, we're back with the Odd Ones Out, and I admit, it has been a while, so why not? Anyway, today we got every form of animation. So, yeah, he's going to the different art styles, and who better than the Odd Ones Out? Anyway, so let's see what you got, James. Let's see what you got. Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Here we go.
This brick is alive.
Not like that.
Not convinced? Well, what if I did this?
I'm gonna do a backflip! That's gonna look so cool, Brickathy!
What are you
String
boys
puppets there.
doing?
Does that even count? Jesus.
Gonna do a backflip, Grandma!
Oh! Oops. Okay. It's one way to do it. How long did this took him?
Are you convinced now? Did the
Well,
brick
anything
feel
can be
more
alive.
Alive? I mean, sure,
Catch
it's still a
information.
brick that can't move on its own, but maybe because I put googly eyes on it and gave it a family, you can
Well,
connect
that
with
and the
brick,
strings, don't
and it
forget the
makes you
strings.
feel emotions. Convincing you that something inanimate is animate is the main goal of the
Animation?
animate or. They're nothing more than deranged blocks. For the last century, animators have innovated new techniques and styles to this medium, taking it from a spinning wheel that doesn't even use electricity to Spider-Verse. And today, I'm going to talk about all the processes and innovations that have brought the medium of animation
This
to
that'd be good.
right now. But first, let's go all the way back to the beginning of film, when it was all
1900s.
black and white and people had to put up text whenever they talked. Early on, filmmakers discovered a very simple trick to make anything appear alive in front of a camera. And that simple trick was called stop.
Oh, stop motion. There we
If you're filming something and then stop the
just-
camera and then move the
sure frame.
thing slightly,
Just
capture a new
sure
image,
frame.
move the thing again, and continue to do that a tedious amount of times, on the film, that thing now magically looked like it move on its own. And with
See?
this technique, you could make literally anything appear to be moving.
I mean, it's still used today with
Anything.
claymation.
But some
It actually
filmmakers took this art form to an extreme level and created whole
Alright.
characters out of clay and a posable metal wire system called an armature. Now, animators can sculpt
See?
unique characters that bend
Tim.
and pose in much more believable ways. With stop motion, you don't need to hire a real dinosaur or giant monkey to make a movie about a dinosaur or giant monkey. I'm sorry you didn't get the job, Phil.
Uh-oh.
You know, I just had a crazy idea. What if we made our entire puppet's head interchangeable? Now they can make any facial
Oh, yeah,
expression and
emotions.
mouth shape possible. We will have to sculpt out hundreds of different heads though, but I mean, come on, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
That's why we're extreme, baby. Stop motion movies are still being made and enjoyed to this day. And while new technology does help make the overall process easier, animators are still using the same techniques that were used on King Kong back in the 1920s, where they carefully pose out a character's every movement frame by frame, in order. Stop motion is a medium that I can't even begin to understand how they do, let alone make it look good, you know? Having a stop motion character.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be able to do that. I'd be just like, do a little too much. Like, oops. Sorry, but those things are really specific. Like, okay, sorry. I'm pulling up like, well, you know, iCarly for a second, an old show. But basically, you have, if you touch any of this stuff, and I think my dog, never mind, sorry, just worried about my pup getting out. Anyway, so, yeah, I still remember it was like the Sam gets a boyfriend thing. Basically, Spencer was making a claymation film, and he just did the adjust, short frame, just, short frame, sports string. When Freddy tries to, like, no, touch it! And he says, so precise. If you move anything, I gotta start all over. And yeah, spoiler alert, the boyfriend actually did screw it up, and oh boy, he had to redo everything. I mean, nowadays, we can pretty much have a placeholder, so that way, or at least, like I said, you gotta be precise with that stuff. Otherwise, back to the beginning, because, yeesh. Anyway.
Character in gravity-defying poses, making hundreds of different faces, is done solely to make the character feel more alive. And sometimes, to help sell the realism, animators will mimic quirks that only happen in live-action films. I always chuckle when I see a lens flare in an animated movie, because, like, where did you come from? There's not even a camera lens. Unlike me, though, who's always got a camera rolling. Hey, how's it going? Uh-oh. Oh, no! Did you catch that? Did you see the motion blur? Look at this lizard eating a bug. Oh, we got him. Now let's rewind the clip and pause right here. This lizard moves so fast that the camera can't even capture its movements correctly, and he transmogrifies into an amorphic blob that barely even resembles a lizard. But do not fret, dear viewer. This is called motion blur, and it's absolutely natural. Fast-moving objects are hard to see in real life anyway, so this blurry blob only showing up for one frame actually helps sell the idea that this little guy is moving quickly. If you watch any movie frame by frame, you'll find motion blur everywhere, and you won't even notice. So how do animators who are taking hundreds of still photos handle this naturally occurring phenomenon with things in motion? Easy, they'll draw smear. Animators draw their own blurry blob frame to mimic fast movements. Bodies can stretch, arms can multiply. Basically, we can sneak in nightmares as long as it's only shown for one frame. Smears, while being very fun to draw, can look very weird and goofy on their own. But in the context of the whole shot, you barely even notice they're there. Okay, maybe now you'll notice them, but that's only because I pointed them out. And since animators are bad boys and don't play by the rules, they can make smears out of anything. Even in stop motion, we can sculpt a physical smear frame like how they did in Leica's Paranorman, which, if you haven't seen, is going to be your new favorite movie. Smear frames can be used anytime, anywhere. Unless you were an animator in the 1920s and 30s and you didn't know about them back then. In that case, you would have been animating something called rubber.
Oh, there we go, rubber hose animation.
In the 1920s and 30s, animators were still figuring out some core principles of animation. Turns out there's 12 of them. Smear frames were used sparingly during this time, with animators usually only drawing characters with multiple limbs to show fast movements. The stretchy, wacky, and spiritually ascending smears that you all know and love weren't really used until the 1940s. Rubber hose characters have noodly, almost hose-like limbs that bend in all sorts of anatomically defying ways.
Mickey Mouse?
Look at Mickey Mouse's noodle arms that I can now legally show you. The reason characters look like this is because drawing noodle arms and not worrying about anatomy is easier to draw. But like, just because something has noodle arms doesn't mean it's bad, you guys. What these animators were able to accomplish with the technology, if you could even call it that, is nothing short of dark magic. And the very same studio that made Steamboat Willie wanted to push the envelope and show the world that animation could be more. It doesn't just have to be noodly characters with Pac-Man eyes. They were going to animate a realistic woman with proportional arms that don't move in weird, exaggerated ways. And oh god, her noodle arms are moving in weird, exaggerated ways. In 1934, Disney released a short called The Goddess of Spring, being their first attempt at animating a character with what was supposed to have real human anatomy. They still had a lot to learn, obviously. Now, animating a quote-unquote anatomically correct human is actually a much harder task than you might realize. And that's because of the uncanny valley. As characters get more and more human characteristics, we hit an interesting point right here when something looks almost like a human, but is just a little off. Our pattern recognition brains start setting off alarm bells and go,
oh, jeez, too much!
Wrong with that almost human. I am entering fight or flight right now. So if you're trying to make something look as close to a human as possible, but are just a tiny bit off, everything crumbles. The Goddess of Spring was still good practice for Disney because definitely uncanny there. They released the world's first fully animated feature film, Snow White. Can you really blame Disney for going 6 times over budget to make this movie? I mean, just look at how these human characters are moving. 10 years before Snow White, animated humans looked like this. So going from this to this in only 10 years?
Damn.
How? I can't get over how...
Yeah, it is pretty crazy, but I think it's more depending on, like, how you animate and how you draw it, you know? Like, heck, if I remember correctly, back in, like, some old school days, Disney's been known to reuse some frames. Basically, they just take an outline of one of their, you know, animations, like a still frame or I don't remember what it was called. But basically, they would have the skeleton of one of the animations. Just do that, and then just draw it over, like so, and done. New form or new character. Basically, if you look like, say, the Jungle Book and Winnie the Pooh, I think you'll see it if you know the frame you're looking for. Don't remember exactly, but it's there. Just it's about something about a log, if I remember correctly. But like I said, just look it up. You'll find it.
Real these human characters look sometimes.
Damn.
Almost too real. Well, I think you're old enough to learn about the dangers of rotoscoping.
Yep, there it is. Rotoscope.
Rotoscoping is the process of taking real-life footage and then manually tracing over every frame, resulting in an animation with unreal levels of realism.
Oh
And
yeah,
I say
I think
unreal
it's
derogatorily. You're basically slapping a cartoon filter over live-action footage, but instead of simply slapping, you're spending multiple hours doing mindless and tedious drawing. Rotoscoping is not the same as filming a human actor and then later referencing that footage, like what Disney did for Sleeping Beauty or Alice in Wonderland or any movie ever, because animators use references all the time. People had figured out how to rotoscope other people long before Snow White. So of course Disney was trying to convey real human movement, rotoscoped some shots. The problem with rotoscoping is that we start to sneak our way back to the bottom of the uncanny valley. Animated characters often do and should break the laws of physics. They can squash and stretch into weird proportions and be drawn in unique and interesting poses. And look, Snow White is still a masterpiece of a movie. The rotoscoping is fine, you barely notice it, it's good, it's a good movie, and it made Disney a lot of money. Also, how did Walt animate these shots of things reflecting in the water in 1937? What, did they put special glass over paintings to make it look distorted or something?
Probably.
Who would be crazy enough to do that? If you made a whole movie entirely rotoscoped, what you end up with is Ralph Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings. Notice anything off about these characters' movements? Look at how Gandalf moved just a year ago in The Hobbit. Now, Lord of the Rings, Hobbit.
Back to Hobbit. Lord of the
Rings. Almost every shot in this movie was rotoscoped, and the shots that weren't used live-action footage with a filter over it. I'm not saying that rotoscoping is bad. You just have to use it correctly. The character switching from traditionally animated to rotoscoped is incredibly funny, and always will be. The YouTuber Joel Javier makes very entertaining rotoscope skits that feel like a fever dream, and I mean that underogatorily. And a lot of music videos get away with rotoscoping because, admittedly, rotoscoping is a very cool visual. Now, I wish I could say the first Lord of the Rings movie was a hidden animation gem, but I don't know, it wasn't. It's not on my top 10, I'm sorry. It probably made a lot of nerds in the 70s happy, but nowadays, thankfully, The Lord of the Rings has been adapted into many other forms of media, like video games, Magic the Gathering cards, and anime. Anime? They're making a Lord of the Rings anime? They're making a Lord of the Rings anime. You thought Hollywood, California was the only place in the world making moving pictures? Japan's been making their own moving pictures too.
Pretty much doing it first and better.
There are entire college courses on the history of anime, but you're not paying me tuition, so we're gonna have to skip over a couple things. A lot of early anime is now lost media because cinemas didn't preserve film back then, and an earthquake destroyed many studios in 1923. Some Japanese animators created shorts out of paper cutouts because buying thousands of celluloid sheets was too expensive, and they had some very unique character designs. And some Japanese animators took inspiration from Disney and made shorts that looked very similar to America's rubber hose characters. Then by the 1940s, some major world events happened that got most of the world involved, and both American and Japanese animation studios were affected. But after all that, in 1948...
I think I remember correctly, the animators were actually... was the animators? I don't remember. It was like, some of them were forced to go to war, some were sent out there to film. Yeah. I'm not kidding. Doesn't mean they didn't still do the animations. There are some World War II stuff out there. I don't remember exactly. But if you look them up, like World War II animations, you'll understand. But, yeah. Coming up, we'll see the form of actual anime in Japanese animation. So, yeah, just give it a heads up.
One studio called Japan Animated Films, later bought out
Toei.
by Toei Animation, set out to be
Yep, here we
the
go.
Disney of the East. And they made cartoons about magical schoolgirls, and are still in business to this day and made some other less popular shows. One
Come on.
animator who quit working at Toei created his own company and made an anime based off
Astro
a comic about a
Boy!
robot boy. Hey, I kind of like that art style of drawing humans with big expressive eyes. Let's do more of that. That same year, another studio made an anime about humans controlling giant robots. I wonder if that's going to inspire a whole new genre. And this guy was commissioned by American studios to make stop-motion Christmas movies like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Meaning Rudolph is anime. Nani? By the 1960s, Japanese shows started airing on televisions all across the globe, and they continued to make unique and interesting stories with amazing animations that were beloved by billions of people and grew into extremely profitable franchises. Like, I'm talking the most
look at
franchise. By the 1970s, Disney was still very much the animated movie gold standard, making big-budgeted movies with family-friendly values. Which is fine to do. Kids love bright colors and talking animals that only cartoons can offer. But some studios realized that animation was a medium, not a genre, and made animated movies exclusively for adults. That's part of the reason why the first Lord of the Rings movie was entirely rotoscoped. It wasn't trying to be cartoony and over the top. It was trying to be real and gritty. Animation could be anything for anyone of any age. But really, if you think about it, there hadn't been a new way of showing people moving drawings since those very early days of black and white stop motion. In stop motion, you take a picture, move a figure, take a picture, move a figure. In cell animation, you take a picture, move a cell,
the cells, there we go.
move a cell. Everything's just been a series of pictures moved manually in front of a camera this whole time?
Pretty much.
Always has.
Has been.
You've got mail.
Hold up.
It says the entire animation and film industry is about to be flipped onto its head forever and ever. Yeah, right. I'm sure this whole computer thing is just a fake.
CGI coming in!
With the ever-increasing advancements of technology, we were able to achieve increasingly advanced achievements, like putting a guy on the moon, and drawing silly little cartoons more efficiently. Gone are the days of having to physically draw everything out on paper and underpay a team of hundreds of pretty girls to hand paint every frame. Now we can use this fancy new computer to render everything out for us. All we have to do is create a real-life mold of our real-life human hand, then draw 350 triangles onto that hand, then manually measure out the X, Y, and Z coordinates of 800 different data points. No, come on, this is gonna be so much faster. Put that pencil down. Now we just program in a couple of keyframes and we get...
Long day.
We still don't have the processing power to render everything out.
Nope.
Oh, I know. We'll just point this long exposure camera at the computer screen. Get these art supplies out of here. This is the future. And when everything's finished rendering...
give it a minute.
We'll get this. A whole human hand moving on its own without having to draw a single frame.
Damn,
this process is exactly what Utah University student Ed Catmull did in 1972. And while it might not have been more efficient than drawing everything out by hand, it showed that computers were capable of rendering out three-dimensional animations. This was made after we landed a man on the moon, by the way, so don't tell me this was CGI. As the computer's processing power grew exponentially, more and more filmmakers started seeing the benefits of using computer-generated images in movies. A decade after Catmull digitized his hand, films like Tron showcased characters racing on mind-boggling computer-generated light cycles. This might look, you know, bad by today's standards, but these graphics were something that audiences had never seen before. Plus, the movie takes place inside of a computer, so this is probably what people thought the insides of a computer looked like anyways. At the time, computers did a great job at creating rigid geometric shapes, and animators used that to their advantage. Characters would still have to be animated traditionally on cells, but objects that weren't going to change shape, like black cauldrons, could now magically fly in circles around our characters. Disney really showed off the computer's rendering power during the climax of The Great Mouse Detective, when these two rodents fought each other inside a clock tower and all the spinning gears were generated by a computer. Animators can now make any complex shape move in a three-dimensional space without having to draw a single frame. I mean, except for the characters, they still
Yeah,
very
of
much had to
course.
draw those.
Those
Computer
would still
graphics
look
were
awful.
here to stay as Disney integrated more of them into movies like these Cars in Oliver and Company or Eric's ship in The Little Mermaid, and then they stopped using cells entirely. Starting with The Rescuers Down Under, Disney no longer used cells and made movies entirely digitally with a program called CAPS. So if you ever wanted to own a cell of Joanna the Lizard eating an egg, that's too bad because they don't exist. Which sucks because Joanna was the best lizard Disney ever made. Don't touch me! TV shows and anime still use cells till about the year 2000-ish, but eventually everyone switched to digital.
There we go.
Now to color a frame, all you had to do was...
Boom.
So computers were great at making rigid, non-flexible shapes, but has anyone ever tried to make a computer?
Oh, there we go.
A group of computer
come the
scientists who
characters.
were working for a small indie director named George Lucas were taking this art form to an extreme level and created whole characters completely generated by a
Pixar.
computer. Then a small entrepreneur named Steve
Jobs.
Jobs
Hi.
hired those computer scientists and made his own company, Pixar. Yes, Steve Jobs was one of the founders of Pixar, and he originally created the company to sell a high-end computer powerful enough to render 3D animations. But no one bought the computer because it cost $135,000. So the team scrapped the computer selling idea and just stuck with making computer-generated cartoons. But they soon discovered a unique problem. The computer had a hard time getting textures right, and everything, including babies, ended up looking like it was made out of plastic. So the team's clever work around this dilemma was to make a movie with the entire cast of characters actually made out of plastic.
Oh,
Or ants. People don't know what ants are supposed to look like.
Not there
It's
yet.
fine. Pixar continued to develop new processes to get the computer to generate unique textures and lighting, like simulating human hair or fur, or lighting things in such a way to make everything appear underwater. No other studio was pioneering computer-generated images like Pixar was. And then in 2006, Disney bought Pixar. But I don't think Steve was too upset because 1 year later, he achieved his dream of selling a high-end computer. This time being a little more affordable. A little. Now, I want to squash any misconception that computers do all the animating. Animators still have to manually pose a character's body and facial expression off of a character's rig. Animators will build a complex system of nodes and bones that let them manually pose a character into any position possible. It's kind of like a digital stop-motion puppet, or an actual puppet without any of the strings. All CG characters are just their own complicated version of Pinocchio. Using character rigs is really the only way of animating things in 3 dimensions. But it's not like we can use rigs in 2D animation. Here in the second dimension, we don't have a fancy Z-axis. 2D animation can only be done by hand-drawing 24 new images every second. Except we don't, I lied. Even all the way back when characters were animated with paper and cells, animators wouldn't draw a whole new frame every frame. Usually, they would animate pieces of a character and paint each piece on its own cell. You remember Robin, they only drew 1 body and 5 different heads. But because cells are a physical object that get harder to handle the more you have, animators could only break a character up into 2 or 3 different pieces. But now, thanks to the computer, we can break up a character into as many pieces as we'd like 4, or 5, or 173. Have you ever played around with the free and revolutionary animation software Pivot Stick Figure Animator? If you're the type of person that says, "Oh, I suck at drawing, I can't even draw stick figures," then you're gonna love this program. On Pivot, you're given a pre-made stick figure or horse that have these joints that can be posed however you like. Each of these stick figures' limbs are just individual pieces that are connected in such a way that make it look like a stick figure. So to make these animations, we're not really drawing anything, we're just manually posing out a character like a digital puppeteer. I wasn't saying you can make a rig out of 173 pieces just to be funny, because that's how many pieces I'm made out of. That's right, me. Even I'm a rig. And can I tell you a secret? Most TV shows use rigs too. Of course, hand-drawn traditional animation is still used to make these shows. It's not a lost art form or anything. But rigs are super useful at making still pretty high-quality levels of animation, but at a much cheaper cost. And as we all know, TV animation has to create more animation per budget. But maybe rig animation still isn't as cost-effective as you'd like. And maybe you're not a fan of the complicated puppet look and you want something that looks more
Natural?
human. Well, there's one more
Oh, yeah, there
animation
it is.
process we can
The
try
mocaps.
called motion. If we put an actor inside one of these
Yeah.
dorky ping pong suits, a computer can pinpoint and record that actor's exact movements. Now we can take those movements.
Oh yeah, that's true. Badger actually uses that a lot. Like, if you ever see him like in those like outside the gameplay footage, that's him using a mocap suit. Like, well, I mean, other than just but basically when he's yapping, that's him just mocapping it all. I'm not kidding. Even some of the funnier moments. So yeah, if you want human-like motions, you're gonna have to get a mocap suit, which, well, can get expensive. Depending on the model, I think. And the software, so you do you. Anyway.
Slap a cartoon character's
There
model
we go.
over it, and we get an animation that looks like shit. Motion capture is the rotoscoping of 3D animation.
True.
It cuts costs, but the results are too human, and we're back at the bottom of the uncanny valley.
Yep.
That's why the kids from the Polar Express look so nightmarish, because they are following the exact movements of Tom
boy.
Hanks. Yes, Tom Hanks, the adult man, did some motion capture for the small, nameless hero boy from the Polar Express. There's probably a reason we haven't made a fully
Yeah.
motion capture cartoon in over 10 years. Because it looks weird. But I mean, that didn't
You're
stop
wrong.
one of these movies from winning an Oscar in animation. And before you ask, no, it wasn't Monster House or Tintin.
Oh,
It was Mars Needs Moms. Duh.
really?
Just like rotoscoping,
Really?
motion capture can
Moms
be
Need Moms?
used correctly.
Why not?
Computer-generated characters acting side by side real human actors look decent. It's not that jarring that these creatures who exist in a live-action world are moving just like live-action people. And let's
Oh, yeah,
not
I
forget
think I
all the
remember what
VTubers
the-
who use motion
Ugh.
capture technology to bring their jiggly assets to life. No matter what
Why?
method someone uses to try and convince you that something
Why?
else is alive, I think is incredibly cool. And I hope
True.
you think it's cool too. But maybe you don't think it's cool, and you don't care about animation, and you just put this video on in the background while you were cleaning.
Wait,
That's totally fine. I do that all the time.
He's like, "Get out of
I
here."
just like learning about how all of my favorite animated pieces of media get created, because it's not always the same process. And I think it's great that new technology is allowing anyone to express themselves in whatever way possible. A person expressing
themselves.
themselves. Those are the three key words here. From the
Let's
big
just hope we're
studios
never
that are
going back
just
to
now
AI.
pioneering new and interesting styles with digital animation, to the indie studios that have access to incredible technology which allow anyone working from their bedrooms in their pajamas to create some truly masterpieces of animation.
Amen.
So, if you're the type of person that likes to trick people into thinking that something is alive, then you deserve all the respect in the world. In fact, here are some cool people that made the animation in this video possible. Hello, you just made it to the end of this video.
What
I
the
hope
hell?
you enjoyed it. I'm still trying to figure out this VTuber model, so I'm over-enunciating my words. The technology behind this is beyond my comprehension. If you're still deciding what to get for the holidays, then great news. We have mystery boxes over on my website, so you can leave the decide.
Okay, if James actually does use that VTuber model, what? I'm a little worried, okay? Jeez. Before you ask, I don't know if I'll do that myself, because frankly, I don't know. I just... what do you guys think? Anyway, so, over this one, like I said, sometimes you just gotta use what you gotta use, but to each their own. Until next time, adios.